Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. I'm assuming it's afternoon for a lot of you. I'm in the States here, so it's kind of getting my day started and looking forward to starting my day on this presentation and talked about the need for data analytics training and particularly some use cases that you all have. And Sonia sent me over this brochure and said, maybe this could be a source for discussion. There's a table here, what can we do with this to make this kind of come alive for our stakeholders? And it actually turned into a really cool project. I feel like it highlighted a lot of cool stuff that you can do in Power BI, and there are a lot of steps involved, and I want this to be hands-on for you. So to that end, Sonia did share the link. You are more than welcome if you want to follow along. If you do have Power BI installed on your computer, didn't talk too much about that. It is a Windows app, so if you are on a Mac today, you're not going to find it. But if you do have Power BI, you're more than welcome to follow along today. The only thing I would suggest is if you click that link, just make sure that you extract the files. Otherwise, it could be a little rough going. Some of the files won't really work in Power BI if they're compressed like that. But otherwise, you should be able to open that. You'll see the slides. You'll see the final dashboard, but I'm not going to spoil the surprise there. But I will share where we're going to start with our data source. Okay, so there is a PDF here. Okay, and this is what we're looking at. So it says 20 Red Lion Street. We're going to go down to page 15. And I thought there was a way. There we go, 15. Okay, so we have a leasing schedule here. Okay, we have some information about the rents, about the fit outs and so forth, the tenancies, vacancies, and so forth. Okay, so our idea is how can we take this and build something that we can track timelines, we can track KPIs, and so forth. And that's really going to be our goal for today. So I'm sure you've seen, if you're in this business, many of these, right? And hopefully today will give you an idea for how can you maybe use some new tools to really bring this to life for, your investors, for your stakeholders. Okay. So a little bit about myself. I think Sonia did a good job with that. I speak and teach around the world on Excel and really helping you make the most out of Excel and Power BI, since they're pretty simpatico in most ways. Helping you get the most out of your data, so that being in finance or operations, you can, explain your data, show it. You're not beholden to expensive tools. You're not waiting for, technical teams to do that work. You can be like as self-sufficient as possible, which means that you can move as fast as possible, if you're not waiting for extra resources, extra people, right? We can do a lot of this stuff ourselves now with tools like Power BI and with Excel. So our goal today, like I said, first we're going to clean the data. Okay, then we're going to work on some KPIs. We're going to then put the dashboard together from there. So there's kind of a process, right? And it all starts with getting our data out of this shape here. So those of you who are following, or if you do have questions, you're more than welcome to use the chat. I'll keep an eye on that. I know Sonia's keeping an eye on that as well. But like I said, this is that PDF. It's page 15. So there are different ways to get this file out of this format into a more, machine readable format for Power BI. The way that I found was probably the easiest is actually just use AI. So what we'll do, and whatever tool you have, of course, I'm not your IT department, but make sure what you're using is in line with your IT policies. I'm going to go ahead and just really briefly, I'm in Microsoft Copilot. So it's just, I think it's copilot.microsoft.com. If you use ChatGPT or any of the other ones, it's basically Microsoft's equivalent of that. So if we ask for something like, can you convert the table in page 15 and in Copilot, you can actually upload files just like you could with the paid version. Most of these are like paid versions that you have to do this. for if you want to upload files. But if I come in here and find my data here, okay, and you're welcome to do this on whatever AI tool of choice you have. Ideally it's IT compliant, but if I upload this, okay, we'll do that. Okay, can you convert? Okay. All right. And we'll see what we get here. Ideally, what we'll get is just a text of that data. And if we have any problems here, because we all, I'm sure those of us who have used AI know that sometimes there's some surprises. I don't want to take too much time on this because I do want to show this is really more of a Power BI session, but ideally this is going to run. And if it doesn't, there is a tenancy schedule CSV. Let me go over here. What I did is, there we go. There's our table. So that's going. So hopefully it would keep going. Okay, yeah, it's still going. All right, so it's taken a while. So I'll just let it run. But there is a CSV file. Those of you who do want to follow along, you can just open that and you'll see that this is what we got from Copilot. Now, it's in pretty good shape. We'll see what happens when we convert some of this stuff into Power BI. I'm noticing that we've got some currency symbols here. The dates are in, British style dates, and I'm not in the UK right now. So we're going to see how we can convert between different time and date formats. There is a little shortcut that you need to know to do that. But otherwise, there aren't a lot of rows, and we should be able to get some interesting insights here. And the first step, like I said, is just to get that into that kind of machine readable format. Power BI actually can read data directly from a PDF, although I found it not to be as good as something like this. And we could even probably ask Copilot to maybe convert this as a CSV file, make it even easier for ourselves, or copy paste, and we should be good with that. The one thing that's interesting that I've noticed is pretty much, yeah, see how the total is kind of broken apart? It's a separate entity. That's actually really nice, right? Because we probably don't want to include our total in the raw data. Otherwise, it's really easy to double count ourselves. But we will come back to this total because anytime you're kind of like putting your data in different formats, moving it from one place to another. Always a good idea just to double check that these numbers tie out. And there actually is going to be a spot here where the way that we do this is not going to tie out because there's kind of a trick that we need to do in Power BI to make these numbers fit. Any questions so far? Everybody able to find the data and kind of know where you're looking and what our objective is right here? And if you do have any questions, just feel free to leave them in the chat. All right. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and open up a blank Power BI desktop report. So you can think of Power BI desktop. It is kind of like a desktop publishing tool. This is like the front end tool that we will be using to build our visualizations and our reports. When we're feeling good about them and we want to share them, there's a publishing process, okay? And that's where some of the licenses and subscriptions come in. But Power BI desktop itself is a free tool. You can go on to like the Microsoft, whatever they call it, the Windows Store, and get a copy, and you can use it to follow along with everything we're doing today. So that part's free. It's just the publishing side of things where you have to start thinking about your licenses, and that's a little out of the scope of what we're doing today. But we're gonna go ahead and create a blank report, okay? And we're going to get our data. So if we come up here to get data, all right, there are going to be a lot of different places. So depending on where you're getting your data, and there is, if I go down here to more, this will give us the full list. And you'll see there are a lot of options. So depending where you're trying to get your data from, and if you've got a specific place, you're welcome to ask, and I'll see if we can find it. But the PDF is there. But like I said, sometimes it doesn't work that well. I feel like the AI tools work a little better than this PDF reader. So just going into AI first is probably a good idea. Let's go ahead and read this in from our CSV file. Okay, and we'll find wherever that folder was located. Okay, and there's our CSV file. All right, so we will bring that in. Now, what we're doing is basically just creating a copy of that data set. So we're not changing it in any way. And this is kind of like a one-off thing, since we are just extracting it from a brochure. If this were coming from something that we would want to update over time, it's like a quarterly data dump or something, this will all be repeatable. And that's the whole goal of what we're doing here. Is it's not like those of you who've worked in Excel where every time you have to run a report, it's like starting from scratch, you're hiding columns and rows, and it's really difficult to kind of audit what happened. Everything we're doing here is like fully auditable. We can go through, each step and see what we did where. Okay, so this is a much better paper trail that we're leaving ourselves than we often get in Excel. Excel actually does have this tool though, however, too, I will say. So Power Query, if you want to do this kind of work in Excel, and I think we kind of hinted at that in the title, this would all foot to Excel as well. Power BI just has a little bit more advanced visuals, like they're a little more interactive. It's a little bit easier to share your dashboard. So that's why we're using Power BI today. But we're going to go ahead and let's transform the data. So we're getting a little preview of our data here. Okay, and like I said, it's looking pretty good, but the devil is going to be definitely in the details here in terms of making this ready to really present. So I'm going to hit transform data, and what that's going to do is bring us to a Power Query editor here. So like I said, it kind of looks like Excel, but it's different, okay? And the big difference is that everything here, and if you kind of see on the ribbon, right, everything really has to do with like data cleaning. It's all about, getting your data into a good format to visualize. So there are some things that I'd actually like to do here to make this in a better position for us to visualize. One of the things, for example, when we see like the fit outs, if we don't want the cat A and cat B, and maybe we just want to show A and B, we don't need to see cat every single time. It's not really giving us good information. We can just split that out. Now you could do this stuff in Excel. You're going to see that in a lot of ways, Power Query makes this easier. A lot of it's point and click. There is a coding language kind of under the hood. Those of you who have used the macro recorder in VBA, similar idea where we are kind of pointing and clicking to get what we want. Everything we're going to do is generating a script. So if you've heard of the M language, that's kind of under the hood. We're not doing that today. And in fact, personally, I think it's a good idea when you're getting started here to go to view and hide the formula bar. I know that some big M fans think that that's heresy, but it's not necessary. We don't need it right now. So if you want to hide it, probably freaks you out less if it's not there. Go ahead and hide it. But we do want to select our fit out column here. And I'm going to go to, I believe it is split column. Let me double check that. No, it is going to be next to transform. If you go up here on the ribbon, okay, there is going to be an extract button here. So again, this is very point and click friendly. We're going to extract, and we want to extract the last characters, okay? And we are going to extract just the last one character, right? So again, that was up here under transform. Make sure you select that one out. And what that's going to do is just extract. So we just had that first one. So a lot easier than trying to like write a function in Excel. And then you probably had to like copy paste the values and then you delete. And it's really messy. This is a lot easier to do. And the other nice thing here is that everything is, like I said, reproducible. So we actually have a kind of catalog of all the steps. So this is the data as it came in. Okay, the first step, Power BI did this for us. The header row gets promoted to that first row. And then there's this row that says change type. That's going to be important for what we're going to do in a bit because each of these columns are a different data type. Those data types are going to be really important for how Power BI, those of you who have ever had like numbers in Excel that were actually stored as text, it can cause a lot of problems. And that's the same idea here. We want to make sure that our data is stored really in the right type for analysis. So that's going to be our next step, but come back down here to extracted last characters. Okay. And then we'll keep going here. One of the other things that I'm seeing is that there are these dashes, okay, in a lot of these columns. That's not really the best way to do this here in Excel. Okay, so if I went to, let's go all the way to, I'm going to do least start. If you hold down control, okay, and you can click all the columns, anything that has one of these dashes in there, those are just indicating that they're blank. And I would see why, in a brochure that would be a good symbol to use to indicate blanks. But here in Power BI, we really want our blank values just to be blank. That's going to make it easier to work with them in the right way. So we're going to do that. We're going to, let's do a control. I think control and H would work. Or if we go to right click any of these columns and then just replace values, you'll come over here. Okay. And this is going to be the dreaded M dash. So you could even like ask for one if you don't know how to do it on your keyboard, because I always forget. Give me an M dash or however you can do it. I'll put one in the chat. If you just do a short dash, it's not going to replace. You actually need the long dash. Okay. So I will put that in the chat. Okay. And what we'll do here is we want to find those M dashes, okay, just one of them, and we'll just replace it with nothing, okay? So we'll hit okay. All right, and okay, that didn't look like it worked. Let me try that again. Let me actually copy this symbol. Maybe it is just a short dash. Let's try that. So that looks a little shorter. So let's go back. If that didn't work, and I did it so fast, you might not have seen. If you don't like a step that you did, you can just hide it. You can get rid of it. You can undo it. Okay, so let's try that again. I'm going to search for these. I'm going to select the columns that I want. I'm going to replace my values. And I want this to be this one I took directly from one of the examples. I hit OK. Okay, and that's looking good. Okay. In fact, we will, yeah, let's leave it like that for right now. I think what we could even do is to make this a little bit even more clear about what these values are. Right now, these say blank, but really, those of you who've used a database before maybe have seen this before, where if you put null in here, and I will put this in the chat. Okay. A null is really the best way. This is going to be absolutely clear to Power BI that these values are missing. Okay, so they're not zero. They're not, supposed to be blank. They're just missing for whatever reason. Maybe they're not applicable. Like if it's a vacant lease or something, yeah, it's not going to have a start date or something, one of those things. So click OK. And that's really what we want to see, where all of these are filled in with null. And what you're noticing that I'm doing here is if you want to, and this is the nice thing with Power BI, is if you are kind of in this state where, you're experimenting with how this should work, you can always go back to these steps. And a lot of them will even, instead of even going to the coding, you can just hit these little click gear wheel boxes, right? And it'll take you back exactly to where you were. So you saw how it took a couple of iterations to get really what we want, but, it's all captured right here. We do have that audit log of what happened. Okay. Any questions so far? We'll do a couple more things to replace our values. And then we will go to the visualizations. Cool. All right. So one thing that we're going to do here is, like I mentioned, a lot of these columns. So if you hit the uh, data type, this is going to be immediately to the left of the label for the column. There is an indication of the column's data type. Okay. And if you hit the drop down, so this one says it's floor and it's text. That makes sense to me, right? Area square feet, this is a number. Okay. Specifically, it's a whole number. That seems fine. Fit out is text. Where some of these aren't really working so well is the dates for the leases and the rent reviews and things like that. So what I'm
George,
going to do, yes.
I think we have a question. I want to know, how did you change the data type and which the type?
Yeah, so the data type, we're going to show an example of how to change in a second, but you'll see right here, every column is going to be a specific data type. Power BI is going to kind of like auto guess which the best fit is going to be. Usually it's right, like square feet being a whole number, that seems fine. Fit out being a text seems fine. Some of these don't look as good. Like, for example, for me, my least start is text. Now, if you're based in the UK, it might have detected this as a date. because it looks like a date. But my system, this doesn't really look like a date. So this part may or may not be kind of applicable to you. But to answer the question about how we actually change the date types, what we'll do, because this is, and if you do have, American dates or American currencies or, any different like formats like that, what we'll do here is let's hit this drop down here under ABC. Down here way at the bottom, it says using locale. Okay, so if I just converted this to a date right now, you'll see it doesn't look so good right there. It gets a little confused. Okay, and that's because it's trying to take those British style dates and convert them to American. So we're going to get rid of that. Let me go back down here and do using locale. Okay, and what that's going to do is give us an option. So it says we want this to be a date. Okay, we also want this to be, and it says locale, so we don't want this to be United States anymore. We want this to be UK. So if we do that, now it's going to know like, hey, this needs to be a UK-based date. Okay. And now those dates are looking a lot better. All right. So make sure that you're aware of that locale thing. What we're going to do with the other ones, and I told you that we weren't going to be writing M code ourselves, but I guess I lied there. We could go one by one and convert each of these, but we could just as easily, if we go back to our formula bar, like I talked about, this is actually the code that is being generated by each of these steps, okay? And most of the time, it is easier just to go in there and point and click and get your options. When you have something like this that's really repetitive that you're going to be doing over and over, you may as well just write it yourself. So if I come up here and it says lease start, type date, okay, what I'm going to do is let's create a comma here, okay, and I'm going to do another inside of my brackets, and I will put this in the chat when I'm done. And if I make a typo, I have this on file, the solutions. So we will get this right one way or another. But you'll see, so I'm just adding to this. So instead of just converting the lease start to a British style date, I'm going to do this for lease start, lease expiry. I'm also going to do this to rent review, and I'm also going to do this to breaks. So this will actually take care of this for all of the columns that I want this to happen to. So that I think looks good to me, and it does look like I made a little boo-boo there. So let me pull my solution file here, just so, live coding, things happen. But what we'll do here, and it looks like I probably have like one too many colons or something like that. Let me pull that. I will put this in the chat as well, so you have that. Okay, so let's put this in the chat. Okay. And I'm going to just copy paste that. And you can just copy paste it just like any other formula in Excel. It does start with the equal sign. Just go ahead, and if you want to give yourselves more space, there is this little toggle button, but you should be able to take that if you're following what I put in the chat. Just put that in that formula bar, and you'll see that these are all set to be proper dates now. So perfect. Okay. And we still actually, we're going to do this a little bit further, because if you come over here, we have these rent figures. Same situation, because these are pounds. Power BI is a little confused about like, is this a currency or not? Okay, because I am in America. Like I said, you might not have to do this if you're based in the UK right now, but you may as well. I don't think there's any harm in kind of, bulletproofing this. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to put this in the chat. Again, what you'll see here, what I'm going to do with this code is just actually add a couple more. So instead of saying type date, these are going to be numbers, okay? But they're still going to be encoded for Great Britain locale. So we can go ahead and just hit enter, and you'll see that those are now, what is it, decimal numbers. So these are ready to go. We will worry about the formatting when we get into the dashboard. So this really isn't a tool for formatting data. It's really just for establishing the data type. And like I said, really, really important, because a lot of the functions aren't going to work. Data's not going to, calculate right if you don't have the right data type established. Any questions about this side of things? Just kind of setting up the data so that we can build our visual.
I think they're saying they can't copy from the chat, but I don't know
Oh,
why.
okay. Let me, okay, so yeah, I don't have a great workaround right
I
now.
think, to be honest, I think because you have shared all the final kind of files, right?
That's true too, yeah.
Yeah, I think. I mean, I don't know why they can't, but they have the file, so yes, that's fine. I think
Okay.
they can copy and paste it on a Word document, and maybe they can from there they can do it in Excel, perhaps, or Power BI, because you can copy this
Yeah.
on a Word document.
Yeah, or and like take a screenshot, and just like dump that into ChatGPT or something. I mean, there are a
Yeah,
lot of ways to get it. So, okay.
yeah.
All right. So that's the data cleaning side of things. Any questions about that before we actually move into the visual? All right, cool. Okay, so our data is in pretty good shape here. We're gonna go ahead and let's close out of this, okay, and think about what we want this to look like. So, what I decided to do here is I want to show the KPIs, and this is a pretty typical like design pattern, as it were, for a dashboard here, where we are going to have our KPIs up at the top, okay, letting people know, what is the average rent per square foot, what's the total, rent value, things like that. Have a little bit of interactivity up here so that users can kind of drill between the different fit outs. They can see the vacancy rate. So just that high level information about kind of like what's going on, at this property in terms of leases, rentals, stuff like that. Okay. Then what I'm going to do is actually create a timeline. I'm going to do a Gantt chart so that you can kind of see over time, when leases start, when they end, you can get that high level. There's a lot of stuff you can do in Power BI. I just decided on this as like an easy kind of achievable high level view so that we can take something, again, like that raw table that is, it's good. It gives you the facts, right? This is good to look at, but it's very hard to get any patterns from this, right? Like I can't really make a lot of sense. And there's all sorts of research that people can really only handle evaluating like 5 or 7 numbers at once, right? Any more than that, we almost need visuals to really help us see that forest from the trees. So that's really what I'm going to try to do with our dashboard here. All right, so let's continue on. And the way this is going to work is that there are a bunch of kind of pre-built templates for different visuals here in Power BI. I'm going to start with a card. Like I said, the card is good for just creating those KPI figures. So if you want something kind of big and bold and in your face, this is a good one to do. So I'm going to take my rent. Okay. I just want to get the total rent. Okay. We'll go ahead and drop that into there. Okay. And we get the number. Now it's not formatted right now. It's not in pounds. If we do want to do that, this is actually a different place to do that. So we're going to go over here to table view. Okay. And if I come over to my rent, all right, there should be a column. And I think this is another one where if I do, let me double check how I did this. If I go down to currency, okay. Okay. Yeah, it is. Okay, so it's not in pounds. There is a way to, let me just, there it is right there. If you want to change that to pounds, seems like it would just make it pounds because it knows it's UK. I don't know why. You gotta double check that, but set it to currency. Under the currency symbol, you can set it to pounds. Okay. And now if we go back, and we may as well do this for rent per square foot, set that to currency. This is really kind of like your master source here in data view. It's kind of confusing because it looks like what we saw in Power Query, but like I said, Power Query is for like the data transformations. This right here in Power BI is really more for like formatting. Okay. And there is kind of a, gray area between what you should be doing here and there. So just be aware of that. Don't want to get too much into the details, but this is really our master source for formatting our data. So the way that we make it look here, by and large, is going to be how it looks. So you'll see back in my report, right? We do have this formatted in pounds. Okay. And we do have a label here. If we did want to change that label and maybe, instead of per annum, we could say annual or something like that. We could come over here to the visual, and there are some areas. I think this would be under maybe not title, but label possibly. You'll see there are a lot of places to format this, but I'm going to leave that as is for right now. I think that looks pretty good. And we're going to go ahead and do the same thing. We're going to do this to our average rent per square foot. Now, before I do that, I'm going to go back to my PDF and make sure again, like, are these numbers actually footing? Okay, so this is 2.39. Okay, and I see that number right there. So that looks good to me. Now what I want to do is get that rent per square foot, right? I want to find that average. And it looks like they averaged that. So, it doesn't really make sense to take a total rent per square foot. They took an average. Okay, so what I'm going to do is make sure when you do this, when you add another card, is click out of the field that you're in, because if I, for example, let's say I wanted to make a bar chart and I'm still clicked in here, it'll just actually convert that to a bar chart. Gets you every time. Just be aware of that. Try to click out of the card that you're in, okay, and then make another card, which is right here toward the right, okay, right middle. And this is pretty much like free form, drag and drop. So I'm going to go ahead and move this to somewhere I want. Okay, that looks pretty good to the right. Okay, and same idea here. I'm going to take rent per square feet, and I'm going to move this into here. Okay, so right now it's taking the total. Like we said, that's not what we want. In here under fields is we can actually change that to an average. So that's the 68.57. Okay, so that's kind of interesting. But again, let's double check our work. Okay, go back to our PDF, and that doesn't match. Okay, so what is happening here? This is like, if you remember in math class, the difference between a straight average and a weighted average. That's the difference. Some of these properties are bigger, right? They're more square feet, so they're going to have a disproportionate impact on the overall pooled square footage. So what we want to do, instead of just taking a straight average of all of these, because some of these properties are a lot bigger, right? This one's like 4,500 square feet. This one's like half of that, right? So we want to be more representative, and we want to take more of that like weighted average more than a straight average. This is where we need to start creating measures in Power BI. So if you've heard of like DAX, calculated expressions, things like that, that's what we're going to do here, because that's not the right number. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that. Okay, actually I could have kept the card, but that's fine. We're going to come up here to new measure, and we are going to create our own square foot measure here. So if I wanted to call this something like average rent, okay, per square foot, and if you wanted to put the pound like in there, but I'm just going to leave it blank for right now. Average rent per square foot is fine. I'll put this in the chat again, and again, if you can't, copy it, you still have the solutions. So we're going to take our tenancy schedule, we're going to take our rent per annum, okay, and then we're going to divide this by the sum of the area in square feet. All right, and if we close the parentheses, okay, let me put that in the chat. Okay, and hit enter. All right, so what you're going to see here is that there is a new field over here in our data view. This is one that we created ourselves, so it's not in the data, but it's a measure created by the data. All right, and this is really the better way if we are going to create. I mean, technically, we even could have done that for the sum of rent. This is just a more precise way of creating our measures. So I'm going to go ahead and bring that over again. Let's take our average rent. And this is not formatted. We do need to come over, and this is kind of confusing because it's not in our data, but we can actually, it says average rent per square feet. We can still actually format it over here. So I'm going to make this a currency, and I'm also going to make this a pound. Okay, so just go over to data. Make sure that this column is selected. Okay, even though you can't see it in data view, you're still formatting it. So just be aware of that. Okay, and now we'll come back, and 6501, let's just double check that. Okay, that's exactly what is in the brochure. Okay, so again, straight average versus weighted average. We want to probably do a weighted average. Okay, Any questions so far? I know we don't have like too much time, so I'm going to try to, I think what I'll do is actually skip to the Gantt chart. And then you do have the final solution if you want to see it later on. Okay. So just for the sake of time, there are some other things, and I could actually let me pull the final solution for what we did here. If we were to keep going, what I did is create a measure for our vacancy rate. Now, if you look at the data, there is one field that, this is the only vacant field. So I made kind of a judgment call about, okay, well, I should probably call that out. Okay. And I created, this is going to be another measure. If you come up here, there's going to be a vacancy rate measure. You can click on any of these measures. It'll show you what I did. Okay, so this is, where you're seeing the math gets a little more complicated. What I needed to do here was, take the vacancy rate divided by all of the square footage. Okay, there's some other kind of error checking going on here. But now what we were able to do, and this is our slicer here. So I think the slicer is this one. A slicer is just a fancy filter. So if you want the user to kind of, be able to drill between the different fit outs and kind of see what's going on with the rents and things like that, you can do that. All right. The only other thing that I had to like kind of put on my thinking cap with this, and maybe you would have a different way of doing it, and I'm still kind of wondering if it was the best way, is down here where I wanted to create the Gantt chart. So this is a visual that is not really native to Power BI. If you come down here to get more visuals, you'll see there's like a whole marketplace it's just like an app store, right? You can go on here and look for different things. And, this is the one that I chose is just built by Microsoft. So, I figured that would be pretty safe to use. Okay. I don't know why the reviews are so bad. I think it's pretty good, but I created this. And when you start creating these visuals in Power BI, what you're going to see is that they're all just very much, if you've created a pivot table before in Excel, you have to figure, what field to drag into what area. And the only place that I struggled with this and what I decided to do is because the Gantt chart's based on dates, right? It needs start date, it needs an end date, and you can track the leasing timeline. Well, if something's vacant, it doesn't have any dates, right? So if we come back here to this data, there's no timeline for something that's just vacant. So I wanted to show that still in the chart just so people know that it's there. So what I decided to do was I actually created, if you come back over here, you'll see, and I guess I haven't actually done this yet, but yeah, filled. Okay. So what I did was I actually filled in the placeholders for like what is the earliest start date and what is the latest end date we have on file. And then I just kind of use that as like a placeholder. So it kind of looks like something's going on. I was hoping that there was going to be a way to like color code this, or there would be a way to group it, and this just takes up more space. So that was one place where Power BI was letting me down a little bit, but I'm sure that there would be a good workaround for it. I just wanted people to know that, like, yes, there is a vacant space when they come down here to look at the timelines, that's there. So, but otherwise, it was pretty cool that you're able to do this and this updates in real time. We're toward the end of 2025. There's our line, and we can kind of see these rates. And the other thing I did is the tooltips with Power BI, you can customize these. So if you want people to drill in here and actually see every property, what's the square foot rent, how many feet are there, you can customize that. So we were able to, again, to take, without going too much more time, take something like this here, okay, which is fine. It gives the data, but it's really hard to get that bird's eye view, right? Where here we're able to see, how many properties are there? What are the lease timelines? What are those KPIs? How do those track by fit out and so forth? And, able to really bring our data to life. So hopefully that's, something useful for you. You can look at the solution to kind of drill into some of the stuff I didn't get to. But, the data cleaning is definitely a big part of what we do. So I'm glad that we at least got through that and we were able to build some visuals as well.